Hello, everyone. My name is Roopa Sunku, and I'm a Chief Evangelist with Touch a Life Foundation. I've got yet another opportunity to speak to you about project communication and management in our Mentor Loop section. Today, we'll talk about what are the 5 primary areas that you need to focus on in terms of communication and sending and helping create the right message and the right impact to the people that you're trying to reach. So, the first and foremost is purpose. You need to identify the plan. You need to review and update the status. Information gathering will also be important for the purpose, scheduling frequency, budgeting the project, deliverables, and risk management. Those are all the elements that need to be understood to determine the purpose of your communication plan. Once you've determined the purpose, you will then go ahead and look at who do you target for this communication plan. It would be all the stakeholders of the project members, the teams involved, the executive level, and sponsors at the project level, and sometimes may include vendors. So there is a producer and a consumer relationship in terms of the who, in terms of the target. The next will be what and the strategy that is initiated or involved here. So you need to look at the initiation plan, the project kickoff, the meetings, the project task reviews, and then presentation to the interest groups. What is the when or the frequency of this communication plan? Based on the purpose that you're driving, you determine frequency to either monthly for the executive level and weekly with the project sponsors and the project team members. And maybe you can create project milestones that could be shared out with the executive level or the stakeholders or the sponsors of the project. It is important not only to determine the frequency of timing, but the milestones as well, to be able to regulate the schedule as needed to create the impact for the project. Then the type. So it could be meetings, it could be emails, it could be presentations, it could be discussions, it could be live demos, or it could just be announcements. Depending on what kind of communication you want to customize and cater, you will then take the appropriate types or methods to be able to get that end result. It's super important to remember that communication in terms of the meetings and the presentations or the demos that you are doing need to be foolproofed, sounded off, and reviewed multiple times with the members of the team so that you are giving the right impact and the right input to each of your messages. And like we talked about, the frequency can be more or less in terms of the phases, be more aggressive initially so that you are steering and getting people to move together and engage together, while on a later time frame, once you have finished completing or establishing that trust and the right direction with all parts of the organization or the hierarchy that's associated to the who's of the project, then you probably can reduce the frequency and be comfortable to go ahead and get that moving. So in order to kind of create a project communication management plan, it's very important to outline who will manage and how will you manage the communication across the entire project. Sometimes there is more excitement over the associations to the vendors, probably, or it is probably a bigger project that needs to be broken down into small bits to make those communication plans and management more streamlined. So you need to first and foremost determine the objectives. So you've got the purpose that we've already spoken about, where you're identifying and reviewing and gathering information. But once you have that purpose understood, you then need to decide on the objectives. Now, what will be the purpose of this communication? How often do you want to make this communication available? Is that going to be available on some kind of a page where it can be reviewed after the fact? Or are you going to make this more of an interactive communication to make the objective stick based on the target audience and their preferences in terms of the communication to be able to make that difference, unblock yourself, and do some risk management to be inclusive and comprehensive should be the goal here. Lots of people may require more transactional detail, and there may be most others that need the high level, authoritative, decision making kind of communication. So break down your audience based on the duties and the level of engagement that they have in this particular project. Also, when you determine your audience, as we talked about, who are the stakeholders in the project, who will be the approvers or the funding authority within the project, should all be understood so that we can make the relevant information utilizing the hierarchy or the execution matrix be impacted with your communication. Write down your message, spawn it off and review it with multiple people. Schedule that inclusive engagement into the plan so that it becomes very simple to lay out the risks and put out the mitigation plans, along with keeping in mind that we have met the objectives for the project. Choose your channels wisely, because there is a lot of corporations that are more inclined towards one form of communication. Absolutely, in person, face to face, or verbal debriefs are very effective. But again, that project or that purpose should be never forgotten, because if it is something smaller in nature, you probably can go with less direct communication mechanics or frequency, but just to kind of keep the pulse and the project moving in the right direction. Also remember, when you start the entire process, the data gathering or the information gathering is super critical. The project manager must be able to collect and analyze the data, create the messages and the communications, and then create documentation for the risk management and the highlighting the roadblocks that will not allow you to meet the milestones, and take it over to the stakeholders that can actually untangle or unravel the milestone blockers to be able to get that long-term and short-term action plan in place. Important thing to do is monitoring a project as well. When you're monitoring a project, you need to communicate upwards in a timely manner, plan your communication mechanics, and make sure you revise and review the feedback that you have received from the different stakeholders or the executive level feedback that you're getting at your project. Messages need to be understood short, crisp, and clear so that it gives you that transparency that you want to establish, and also create a momentum so that you get the appropriate feedback and make those corrective actions with the team members engaged, giving that inclusiveness and engagement into your project. Excellent communication is super critical to any project success. And sometimes the work can get done, but if you do not communicate that effectively, it may not turn out to be a good project or understood or seen as a good project. So it's important to make sure that we have understood the priority within the organization and making sure that the channels and the perspective that you're bringing into the communication is what is the objective of this entire effort. Following some skills like active listening, proficient writing, speaking confidently, asking questions, providing and gathering feedback, setting the tone within the levels of communication, motivating the people to stay engaged, and conflict resolution are all aspects of communication that will help you summarize, recap, and reiterate what are the elements of the process and the project that need to be altered to make this a prioritized successful engagement. It's also important to keep in mind that project teams fail because of inadequate planning, lack of transparency, or failure to refine over time, or unblocking themselves at the right moment in any project. So kind of keeping that in mind, it is also important to have communications based on the different hierarchies or the different span of controls that you want to establish within a communication plan for a project. Sometimes the transactional level activity needs to be shared at one level of the project team, and then yet others like the crisis management or the risk management needs to be done at a different level, and being able to make sure that it is ascertaining the right strategic input that it needs to establish is probably the third level of the hierarchy. And lastly, and most important, the stakeholders and the executive level or the project sponsors should feel that this effort has been accomplished with the right perspective, right priority, and right specialization that is required. So I hope you're able to gather a few important aspects of a communication of the what, who, where, when, and how that you want to establish within a project communication plan. Please do join us at Touch a Life's career help programs. And if you wish to be a mentor or a mentee, do visit us on touchalife.org/career help and let us know if you will be engaged with us to help other people establish their careers and make those right decisions within their careers, and some of the other aspects or perspectives or stories that you would be able to share with us. Happy to work with you folks. Please do reach out. Thanks again, and hope you're able to take a few key aspects of project communication that we've shared today from what I have learned and engaged with. Thank you again.